Tonight, mass redundancies at Channel 10. Major cuts announced at the network. News from 3 capital cities will be presented interstate, with well-known presenters made redundant in another devastating blow for the media industry.
Media in Australia is in a very tough position.
Plus, New Zealand records their first cases of coronavirus in more than 100 days. Auckland placed into stage 3 lockdown. Also tonight, the entire Lebanese government resigned in shame following mass protests after last week's deadly explosion. Joe Biden announces Kamala Harris as his running mate, making her the first black woman on a major party presidential ticket. And Russia claims they've already developed a COVID-19 vaccine, but would you take it? That's the question we're asking tonight in our Twitter poll. 6 News starts now. Good evening. Channel 10 has announced devastating cuts coming to its news department, with several well-known faces set to be made redundant by the network. From what we understand, the Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth news bulletins will all be presented interstate as part of these major changes. Sandra Sully presenting a combined bulletin for Sydney, Brisbane and Perth, and Jennifer Kite presenting for Melbourne and Adelaide viewers, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, the bulletins will not be live into South Australia and WA, and also will not be live into Queensland. Obviously, that's when daylight savings are in place. According to the network, this will all come into effect on September 14. And the network's morning show, Studio 10, has also faced cuts, with at least 2 members of the on-air team set to be made redundant. HOLMES has more.
Shockwaves were felt right throughout the Australian news broadcasting industry on Tuesday as Channel 10 announced the shock axing of 25 of its biggest stars.
We're losing colleagues, we're losing mates, we're losing family members essentially.
Weatherman Tim Bailey, Studio 10 host Kerry-Ann Kennelly and journalist Natasha Belling all fell victim to the brutal budget cuts in response to the sharp decline in advertising revenue caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's very, very tough for a lot of people.
Among the stars leaving Network 10, they include 10 News First Brisbane's Georgina Lewis and Josh Holt, 10 News First Adelaide's Rebecca Morse, Kate Freebarn and Will Goodings, 10 News First Perth's Monica Koss and Michael Schultz, and Melbourne's weatherman Mike Larkin.
You have to be, to survive, the most adaptable. Companies, it's not the first time, unfortunately. Companies do these sort of cuts to make the business better.
Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
And former Studio 10 reporter David Robinson spoke to 6 News exclusively about the major changes. Take a look.
Well, I think it's a really sad time for Channel 10 and the media as a whole in Australia. The people who work at Channel 10 are very passionate about what they do. The worrying thing, though, with 10 is that they seem to kind of repeat themselves. It's almost like a Groundhog Day where they cut all the news services and then a year or 2 later, they then build them up again only to do the cutting a year or 2 later after that. So it's very sad. You know, obviously media in Australia is in a very tough position, but my hearts, my thoughts, my prayers all go to all the wonderful people who I know work at 10, not just in Sydney where I worked for so many years, but also in Brisbane and right across the network. I think it's a very sad day and I certainly wish them all the best.
Let's change pace now and get the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic, where in Victoria, health officials are cautiously optimistic about declining case numbers. Now, infections in the state have been significantly less in the past fortnight than in early July. However, the death toll continues to rise, with overnight deaths breaking new records several times in the past 14 days. On Friday, a 20-year-old became the country's youngest death as well. Now, the Premier, Dan Andrews, believes the curve is flattening, while also mentioning increased concern about cases rising in regional Victoria. They have been rising in Geelong, Bendigo and Ballarat. More testing sites have now been opened in those areas. And at least 3 Coles stores, including one in Geelong, have closed after several workers tested positive for coronavirus. Additional deep cleans have been conducted. Coronavirus cases continue to rise in New South Wales, with the majority of cases linked to a cluster in Sydney's northwest. Now, the majority of those infections have been acquired locally. However, there are still some linked to hotel quarantine and over the border in Victoria. There is concern about the lack of social distancing by some. One photo taken by a Sydney commuter showing a packed bus in their CBD, witnesses saying the bus's central aisle was fully packed with no room for social distancing. Now, Sydney councils are also scrambling to determine how New Year's Eve parties and fireworks would look, with some saying they should not go ahead at all. Politicians have also weighed in on the debate. This video from SBS World News.
I would love to see fireworks on the Harbour Bridge celebrating 2021. I think everyone's just had a pretty shitty 2020, and having a fantastic celebration of starting a new year is probably going to put a smile on people's faces. Saying that, I think we have to recognise that it's not going to be a traditional New Year's Eve. There won't be the volume of people around the city. We're going to have to manage that. But if we get an opportunity to celebrate a new year, put 2020 behind us and do so on the world stage, that's got to be a good thing, doesn't it?
New Zealand have recorded their first coronavirus cases after more than 100 days of being COVID-free. The country's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made the grim announcement at an unscheduled late-night press conference.
While we have all worked incredibly hard to prevent this scenario, we have also planned and prepared for it. We have a resurgence plan that we are now activating. That plan is based on everything that we have learned as a country to date about COVID-19. It's also based on what we've seen from resurgence overseas.
This has led to Auckland being once again placed into level 3 lockdown, with the rest of the country in level 2. Authorities say the infected people were not returned travellers from overseas and are working to currently find the cause. The country had been praised previously for quote-unquote eradicating the virus. Now, New Zealanders are meant to head to the polls this September. However, the country's opposition party wants the elections to be postponed. A new poll suggests that most Americans still aren't wearing masks despite constant advice from health officials to do so. Our US correspondent Jackson Gosnell has more.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to impact the world, America is taking a hard hit with new cases every day. Some states have cases continuing to rise while others are declining. Health officials are still advising to wear a mask and remain socially distanced from others, and some health officials are now recommending that folks wear a face shield as well to prevent the spread of this virus. Now, I spoke with some health officials in the state of South Carolina here where I am. They say that wearing a face shield doesn't really help, while Dr. Anthony Fauci believes that it does. So a lot of talk on both sides in terms of what they agree on and what they don't. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and into the election. Some other news for you. Just breaking, Joe Biden, a former vice president here in America who's now running for president, just announced his running mate as Kamala Harris. She is a California senator and she ran against him in this presidential election. So it will be a very interesting and a very odd election. We'll just see how it all plays out, whether Donald Trump will win or Vice President Biden, who will then, of course, be the president if he wins. I'll continue to follow everything happening from here in America and make sure that you are caught up. I'm reporting in America. Jackson Gosnell, back to you.
Jackson Gosnell reporting there. Now, staying in the US, Donald Trump has been escorted out of a press conference by Secret Service after a shooting outside the White House. Take a look.
Records hopefully soon. Excuse me? Sorry for that. There was a shooting outside of the White House and seems to be very well under control. I'd like to thank the Secret Service for doing their always quick and very effective work.
Trump says the shooting was conducted by law enforcement after a man allegedly shouted threats, with a police report obtained by the Associated Press saying the suspect had a gun. However, or the suspect saying he had a gun rather. However, though, one source told the AP that the suspect was unarmed. The investigations are ongoing. The entire Lebanese government, including their Prime Minister, have resigned. Straight to our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jack Hahn. Jack, what was the reason for this sudden resignation?
It was the Beirut blast, Leo. That was the final straw for the Lebanese people. They could no longer sit aside while what they say the corruption of the Lebanese government went on. And it's not hard to see why when you take a look at the distressing and disturbing scenes of death and destruction. Almost 200 people killed in this explosion. It looked like a scene out of a movie. It looked like a nuclear weapon. The power from this explosion left a mushroom cloud. Now, if this was to happen in Sydney, just to give you an idea of the destruction, if it was to detonate in Pitt Street, as you can see on your screen, the initial destruction would decimate the entire central business district. And that is what we are seeing in Beirut. Upwards of $15 billion worth of damage to the city itself and also the economy. But the government just couldn't survive this destruction and death from this explosion. Now, there has been an undercurrent of animosity between the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government for a long time. It really dates back to the Civil War, and last year we saw it spill into the streets over some protests on taxing the app WhatsApp. And it has been heightened by the coronavirus. The economy in Lebanon was already struggling. People were losing their jobs. People were struggling to provide for their families. So when you had that undercurrent of animosity already toppled with these disturbing scenes, this destruction, it is not hard to see why the Lebanese government could no longer survive. But it won't be an easy ride up for the Lebanese people in regards to reforming the government. The political system is a complex one between coalitions and religious leaders, but this is giving the Lebanese people new hope that while they rebuild Beirut, they can also rebuild their political system and give them the future that they deserve. It is a beautiful country and it will be a beautiful Beirut sometime again soon. But in the meantime, it is going to be a very hard coming weeks and months for the Lebanese people as they rebuild their political system and rebuild their beautiful city. Back to you.
Alright, we'll leave it there. Jack Hahn reporting from Sydney tonight. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break now. Coming up next on 6 News, we'll recap our top story. Plus, Nova FM also hit by cuts on the same date. Channel 10 made mass redundancies. Also, unemployment levels rise despite signs of a slight pandemic recovery. Russia claims they have a COVID-19 vaccine, but would you take it? Stay with us.
Streaming across the globe, Ben Norris, Rob McKnight, and David Robinson.
Ben, Rob, and Robbo. News, reviews, entertainment news. It's the Ben, Rob, and Robbo. Ben, Rob, and Robbo. Ben, Rob, and Robbo Show.
The Ben, Rob and Robbo Show, Monday to Thursday at 1 p.m, right here on Ticker TV.
That story went round on late Saturday afternoon. It was broken on that website 6 News.
He's only 12 years old, but already Leonardo Puglisi fronts his own news channel.
That is incredible. Absolutely inspiring.
Leo's fantastic. He's doing an amazing job. He's everywhere. He's breaking stories.
That's pretty impressive, Leo. Leave it there for now. We do. I might see him doing a bit more stuff on camera before too long.
Very good at what you do, young man.
What an amazing guy.
This is your studio here. It's a pretty sweet setup you've got.
We're following your story. We're rooting for you.
He will be the next Karl Stefanovic. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, lovely to see you. And go hard.
Welcome back. Recapping up top story this Sunday, and Channel 10 have announced mass redundancies with news bulletins in 3 capital cities to now be presented interstate morning shows. Studio 10 has also made cuts. At least 2 of their on-air current presenters will leave, with some reports about a new look version of the show going into the future. This follows major job losses at BuzzFeed, News Corp and the ABC. Nova FM also made cuts on the same day, Mumbrella reporting that at least 70 roles will go as the broadcaster tries to deal with the impact of the pandemic. Australia's unemployment rate has risen to 7.5% despite signs of slight pandemic recovery, especially in Victoria. Now, figures released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics show seasonally adjusted employment increased between June and July, with the overall percentage of Australians currently employed actually rising to 60% now. Many of the changes came after Victoria announced Stage 3, then obviously Stage 4 lockdowns for the Metro Melbourne area. Tasmania have recorded their first cases of coronavirus in more than 20 days. The state's Premier, Peter Gutwin, says a man in his 60s tested positive for the virus in the Northwest Regional Hospital. Authorities say the man had been in Melbourne for medical treatment before being transported back to Victoria. Contact tracing is underway. Vladimir Putin has shocked the world after announcing that Russia has developed a COVID-19 vaccine after less than 2 months of human trials. Putin also saying his daughter has already taken the COVID-19 vaccine, but would you? Our Twitter poll shows that 85% of you would not take that vaccine, 15% of you say you would. It comes after experts say it may take years to find a working cure for coronavirus. Quickly checking the weather now. Brisbane sunny, a top of 20. Sydney 18. Canberra 12. Melbourne partly cloudy 16. Adelaide some light drizzle 16. Perth heavy rain also 16. Darwin a sunny top of 32. Townsville 26. Wollongong 15. Ballarat 12 and cloudy. Bendigo 14 and rain on the way for Hobart 14 degrees. And that is 6 News for this Sunday evening. You can stay updated on all our social pages at 6 News AU. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.